The warning and the invasion. The grand chamber of the galactic hegemony sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars, filtered through crystalline domes that crowned the massive structure. Representatives of 300 species filled the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of the galaxy's dominant civilizations. At the center of the chamber stood Elder Vox, his ancient frame seeming frail compared to the larger delegates, but commanding absolute silence with his presence alone. Esteemed members of the hegemony, Vox began, his translator converting his whistling language into the standard galactic speech. I come before you with grave concerns regarding your planned resource acquisition from the third planet of the Sol system. Supreme Commander Zix, the military leader of the hegemony forces, shifted impatiently on his command platform. His metallic scales reflected the chamber's light as he towered over most other representatives. Elder Vox, with all respect to your 3 millennia of wisdom, we have reviewed the data. The species called humans are primitive. They have barely reached their own satellite. Their greatest weapons would be toys to our youngest pilots. Vox's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of frustration in his species. It is not their technology that concerns me, Commander. It is their nature. With a gesture of his gnarled hand, Vox activated the central projection system. Images of Earth's history played before the assembled delegates. Humans fighting wars, rebuilding cities from ruins, persisting through plagues and disasters. Observe their resilience, Vox continued. In my long study of sentient species, I have never encountered a race with such tenacity. They do not surrender when logic dictates they should. They do not forget when wronged, and they do not forgive those who harm their kind. Minister Kalara of the Commerce Guild rose from her seat, her floating form pulsing with blue light. The resource projections are clear, Elder. The Sol system contains rare heavy elements we require for the new hyperspace network. Negotiations would take decades we cannot spare. Then leave them be, Vox countered. There are other systems. None as rich, none as accessible. Zix interrupted. The decision has been made. The acquisition fleet departs tomorrow. This discussion is merely a courtesy to your station, Elder. Vox lowered his head. Then I shall provide one final warning, to be recorded in the eternal archives of this chamber. If you attack the humans, they will not behave as other species have. They will not beg for terms when defeated. They will adapt. They will remember. And they will hunt you until either they or you cease to exist. Laughter rippled through the chamber, quickly silenced by Zix's raised hand. Your concern is noted, Elder. This council is adjourned. As the delegates filed out, a young aide approached Vox. Elder, do you truly believe these humans are so dangerous? They are so small, so fragile. Vox turned all 4 eyes to the aide. The most dangerous predator is not always the largest or strongest, young one. Sometimes, it is the one with nothing left to lose and the will to never stop hunting. Captain Diana Miller of the United Earth Space Force stared at the massive alien vessel that had appeared in lunar orbit without warning. Her small patrol ship, the UES Vigilant, had been the closest to respond, but what could one patrol craft do against something that dwarfed Earth's largest battleship? Any response to our hails? She asked her communications officer. Nothing, Captain. We've transmitted the first contact protocol in every format we can. They're receiving but not answering. Diana studied the alien ship's sleek design. Keep our distance and maintain transmission. Alert Earth Command that we need. A blinding flash erupted from the alien vessel. Diana shielded her eyes instinctively, then froze in horror as she looked back at the view screen, where Armstrong Colony had stood on the lunar surface, home to 12,000 scientists, engineers, and their families. There was now only a smoking crater. My God, whispered her first officer. The alien ship's communication system activated suddenly, filling their bridge with a cold, mechanical voice. Representatives of Earth, this is Supreme Commander Zix of the Galactic Hegemony. Your solar system contains resources claimed by our authority. Your colony interfered with our scanning operations, and has been removed. Further resistance will result in additional enforcement actions. Clear all mining facilities within 10 of your Earth days. This message will not be repeated. The transmission cut off as suddenly as it had begun. Diana's hands gripped the command console until her knuckles turned white. Get me Earth command. Now. 1 month after the destruction of Armstrong Colony, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Council. The chamber, once filled with representatives from Earth's nations, now held only a fraction of its members. The hegemony's enforcement actions had escalated after Earth refused to abandon its resource operations, with orbital strikes hitting major cities on every continent. The casualty reports stand at 23 million confirmed dead, Sarah stated, her voice steady despite the horror of the numbers. The hegemony forces have established mining operations on Mars, Venus, and throughout the asteroid belt. Our remaining military assets are insufficient for a conventional defense. Then we surrender, suggested one counselor, his voice breaking. We've seen what their weapons can do. We can't fight this. Sarah's eyes hardened. With respect, counselor, surrender is not an option. The hegemony doesn't want our cooperation. They want our absence. Intelligence suggests they plan to process Earth once their mining operations are complete. Silence fell over the room as the implication became clear. What do you propose, Admiral? Asked Council President Okafor. Sarah activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Operation Prometheus. For 3 weeks, we've been collecting debris from destroyed hegemony vessels. Their technology is advanced, but not incomprehensible. Our scientists have made a critical discovery. The display showed schematics of the alien ships, with one section highlighted. The hegemony's power systems rely on a form of exotic matter that creates fields we cannot yet replicate. However, we've found that certain radioactive isotopes, when configured in specific ways, can disrupt those fields. You're saying we can hurt them? President Okafor leaned forward. More than hurt them, Madam President. We can blind them, disable them, and with enough concentrated effort, destroy them. Sarah's voice took on an edge that hadn't been there before. And we've developed delivery systems they won't see coming. How long to prepare this operation? Asked another counselor. The first phase is already underway, Sarah replied. We've converted the Galileo Deep Space Research Station into a manufacturing facility. The station's isolation has kept it safe from hegemony detection so far. Sarah straightened, looking at each council member in turn. I need your unanimous authorization. Once we strike, there's no going back. The hegemony will know we're not just hiding, we're fighting. President Okafor stood. Understand what you're asking, Admiral. If this fails, it could mean the end of our species. And if we do nothing, that end is guaranteed, Sarah countered. Humanity has faced extinction before, Madam President. We're still here. The hegemony thinks we're just another primitive race to be stepped on. They're about to learn how wrong they are. After a moment of silence, President Okafor nodded. The Council will vote. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. Despite their fear, despite the overwhelming odds, the result was unanimous. Operation Prometheus was approved. Supreme Commander Zix stood on the command deck of his flagship, overlooking Earth from high orbit. The blue planet looked peaceful from this distance, though he knew that down on the surface, the remnants of human civilization struggled to survive after the hegemony's demonstration strikes. Resource extraction is at 60% of projected capacity, Commander reported his second-in-command. The humans continue sporadic attacks against our mining operations, but nothing significant. Zix's metal-scaled hand waved dismissively. Increase security protocols if necessary, but maintain the schedule. The Council expects this system to be processed and ready for colonization within 1 standard year. Commander, interrupted the sensor officer, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from Earth's moon, in a region we haven't surveyed. Dispatch a scout vessel, Zix ordered, likely just another primitive attempt at resistance. 3 hours later, the scout vessel approached the far side of the moon, where humans had apparently established a small outpost. Strange readings emanated from the location, but nothing that registered as dangerous to hegemony systems. The scout ship never reported back. Annoyed, Zix dispatched a destroyer with orders to eliminate whatever lunar facility the humans had created. The destroyer approached with weapons charged, ready to reduce the outpost to dust. It happened in an instant. Dozens of small objects launched from the lunar surface, too small and fast for the destroyer's automated defenses to target. They impacted across the vessel's hull, each detonating with a pulse that wasn't explosive, it was disruptive. The destroyer's systems failed in cascading sequence. Its shields collapsed. Its engines died. Even its emergency beacons went silent. Then, from the dark side of the moon, emerged human vessels, crewed by hegemony standards, but moving with purpose. They surrounded the disabled destroyer and attached to its hull. Within hours, the destroyer vanished from hegemony tracking systems. When Zix received the report, he felt something unfamiliar, a sensation he eventually recognized as concern. "It appears," he said slowly, "that we may have underestimated these humans." On the bridge of the captured hegemony destroyer, Admiral Sarah Chen ran her hand along the alien control interfaces, now partially reconfigured for human operation. Engineers and scientists worked feverishly around her, stripping every piece of technology they could understand and incorporate. "How long until we can replicate their shield technology?" she asked the chief scientist. "Weeks, not months," he replied without looking up from his work. "Their weapons will take longer, but we're learning fast." Sarah nodded and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the hegemony's home, the heart of the civilization that had attacked Earth without provocation, that had killed millions without remorse. They should have taken the warning, she whispered to herself. Now we'll never stop hunting them. Operation Prometheus had begun. The hegemony had sown the wind. They would reap the whirlwind. The hunt begins. 5 years passed like a lightning strike in the cosmic scale of galactic politics. For the galactic hegemony, it was barely enough time to notice a change in the quarterly resource reports from the Sol system. For humanity, it was enough time to transform from prey into predator. Captain Marcus Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, a ship that existed in no official record. Its hull was a hybrid of human engineering and reverse-engineered hegemony technology, rendering it nearly invisible to standard detection systems. The crew of 60 had been handpicked from Earth's surviving military forces, each with personal reasons to hate the hegemony. "Approaching Proxima Centauri outpost," reported his navigator. Hegemony presence confirmed. 8 vessels in orbit, 1 major facility on the surface. Marcus nodded, his scared face betraying no emotion. The explosion that had killed his family in the London strike had left its mark on more than just his skin. "Initiate Phase 1. Let's see if our intelligence was correct." The Nemesis slipped through the outpost's defensive perimeter like a ghost. Behind it came 5 more ships of Earth's newly christened Vengeance Fleet, each carrying weaponry that would have been unimaginable to human engineers before the hegemony's arrival. On the hegemony command station, Monitor Kelvik was the first to notice the anomaly. "Station control, I'm detecting unusual radiation signatures near Defense Satellite 6. Possible equipment malfunction." Before station control could respond, alarms blared across the facility. The defense satellite exploded, followed by 2 more in rapid succession. "We're under attack," Kelvik shouted, but it was already too late. The Nemesis decloaked directly in front of the command station's main viewport, close enough for Kelvik to see the human insignia painted on its hull, a phoenix rising from flames, with Earth centered in the background. A transmission cut through the chaos on all hegemony channels. "Hegemony forces, this is Captain Marcus Reynolds of Earth's Vengeance Fleet. The Sol system sends its regards." Synchronized antimatter charges detonated across the station's power grid. As emergency systems failed, the human ships methodically targeted each hegemony vessel in orbit. Not with random destruction, but with precise, surgical strikes that disabled their engines and communications first, leaving the crews helpless as boarding parties breached their hulls. Take as many alive as possible, Marcus ordered as the Nemesis moved alongside the Hegemony flagship. We need information more than we need vengeance today. His executive officer, Commander Lena Diaz, raised an eyebrow. That's not what you said when we found the colony ship heading for Earth. Marcus's eyes darkened. Different mission, different priorities. Today we need to know where their central command is. Tomorrow. He left the sentence unfinished as he prepared to lead the boarding party himself. 3 days later, in what had been the Hegemony commander's quarters, Marcus and Lena reviewed the intelligence they had gathered. They never expected us to leave our system, Lena said, scrolling through the captured data. Their security protocols are focused on preventing rebellions in established territories, not countering external threats. Marcus studied the star map they had reconstructed. And now we know the location of 13 more outposts, plus their primary shipyard in the Sirius sector. The fleet is requesting the next target, Lena reminded him. Marcus's finger traced a path through the stars. The shipyard. We hit them where it hurts, and we take their ship designs. Admiral Chen needs those if we're going to expand the fleet. As the Vengeance fleet prepared for their next hunt, news of the Proxima Centauri attack spread through Hegemony space like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Hegemony faced an enemy that fought back, not just for survival, but for retribution. In the Grand Chamber of the Hegemony, emergency sessions had become the norm. Supreme Commander Zix, once confident to the point of arrogance, now stood before the Council with visible tension in his posture. The humans have struck again, he reported grimly. The Sirius shipyard has fallen. 17 capital ships destroyed, 38 in various stages of construction captured. Technical data completely compromised. Minister Kalara's blue luminescence had dimmed with each new report of human victories. How is this possible? They were primitives. They had no interstellar capability. They adapted, came a familiar whistling voice from the chamber entrance. Elder Vox moved slowly to the center of the floor, his frail body showing the strain of the emergency journey. They learned from you. They studied your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Zix's scales rattled with barely contained fury. You sound almost proud of these vermin, Elder. I am not proud, Vox replied. I am vindicated. I warned this council what would happen if you attacked the humans. Now you face the consequence of your arrogance. A junior commander stepped forward with a datapad. Supreme Commander, we've lost contact with the Rigel mining colony. Initial reports indicated human ships in the system. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Rigel was less than 20 light-years from the Hegemony's core worlds. Silence, roared Zix. I have already ordered our remaining fleets to establish a defensive perimeter around our key systems. These humans are still limited in number, regardless of their stolen technology. A defensive perimeter. Vox's translator couldn't fully convey the disbelief in his whistling. You still don't understand. They don't want territory. They want you. All of you who decided their world was expendable. They will not stop at perimeters. What would you have us do, Elder? Demanded Kalara. Surrender to primitives. Vox's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. I would have you seek peace while you still can. I have been contacted by human representatives. They are willing to meet. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. You've been in communication with the enemy. Zix's hand moved to his ceremonial weapon. That's treason. It is wisdom, Vox countered. They will speak only with me, as I was the one who warned against attacking them. I have agreed to meet their delegation in neutral space. Out of the question, Zix declared. This is obviously a trap. Vox turned to address the full council. I will go, with or without your blessing. But know this, if you refuse this chance at diplomacy, if you continue to underestimate these humans, I believe the hegemony as we know it will cease to exist within a standard year. The council chamber fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Elder Vox waited in the ancient stone temple on Sanctuary, a planet declared neutral territory by all spacefaring civilizations millennia ago. The massive columns, carved from a single mountain by a species long extinct, created shadows that danced in the light of 3 setting suns. He did not wait long. 3 humans entered the temple, moving with the cautious precision of predators. 2 remained near the entrance, weapons visible but not raised. The 3rd approached Vox directly, a female with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that reminded the elder of the hunting birds on his homeworld. Admiral Sarah Chen. She introduced herself without preamble. "Your elder, Vox." "I am," he acknowledged. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You warned them about us," Sarah said, studying the ancient alien. "Why?" Vox gestured to the temple around them. "I have spent my life studying the rise and fall of civilizations. The species that built this temple believed themselves invincible. They expanded too quickly, took too much, respected too little. When the reckoning came, it was absolute. And you saw the same pattern with the hegemony's plans for Earth." "Yes, the hegemony has grown complacent in its power. I hoped to prevent a tragedy." Sarah's expression remained neutral. 12 million children died in the first wave of attacks. Was that tragic enough? Vox lowered all 4 eyes. "I failed to convince them. For that, I carry great sorrow." Sarah walked slowly around the ancient alien, sizing him up. "You've taken a risk coming here. Your council thinks this is a trap." "Is it?" Vox asked simply. "No. We need information more than we need one more dead hegemony official." Sarah stopped directly in front of him. "We want Zix and the council members who authorized the attack on Earth. We want reparations. We want guarantees." "The council will never agree to surrender its leadership," Vox said. Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We're not asking for their agreement, Elder. We're telling you what will end this hunt. Either they face justice, or we will bring it to them, world by world, ship by ship, until there is nothing left of your hegemony." Vox studied the human admiral carefully. "You have the capability to do this." In answer, Sarah activated the small projector. It displayed the current status of the human campaign. Far more extensive than even Vox had imagined. Dozens of hegemony outposts had already fallen. Supply lines were severed. And most concerning, the display showed 7 human battle groups converging on the hegemony capital system itself. "We've been busy these 5 years," Sarah said quietly. "Your warning gave us something precious, Elder Vox. It told us we were right to fight back, that someone in the galaxy understood what the hegemony had awakened." Vox stared at the projection, his ancient mind calculating possibilities. "You would end this conflict if your terms are met." "We're not monsters," Sarah replied. "We don't want extermination. We want justice, and we want our place in the galaxy. A place we'll never again allow anyone to threaten." Supreme Commander Zix stood on his command platform in the hegemony's capital city, watching in disbelief as human ships materialized in the system. Not just a few vessels, but hundreds, an armada that should have been impossible for a species that, just 5 years earlier, had barely touched their own moon. "How did they find us?" he demanded of his staff. "How did they build such a fleet?" No one answered. No one needed to. They had all seen the reports of hegemony ships disappearing, only to reappear later fighting alongside the humans. They had all read the intelligence about human engineers reverse engineering and improving upon hegemony technology. "Supreme Commander," his communications officer said hesitantly, "the human flagship is hailing us. They're asking for you by name." Zix straightened his massive frame. "Put them through." The view screen activated to show Captain Marcus Reynolds of the Nemesis, the human who had become a nightmare figure in hegemony military reports. "Supreme Commander Zix," Marcus greeted him with cold formality. "I believe you know why we're here. If you think the hegemony will surrender to primitives who got lucky with stolen technology, you are mistaken," Zix replied. Marcus smiled thinly. "Not the entire hegemony. just you and the council members who ordered the attack on Earth. Elder Vox has negotiated terms on behalf of your people. The rest of the hegemony can live in peace with humanity and our growing list of allies. Allies? Zix's scales rattled in disbelief. Did you think we only freed our own people from your mining colonies? Marcus asked. Every world you've subjugated, every species you've exploited, we've been making friends. Turns out, the hegemony isn't as beloved as you thought. The view screen split to show ships of various designs taking position alongside the human fleet. Vessels from a dozen subjugated worlds, all united against the hegemony. You have 1 hour to surrender yourself and the responsible council members, Marcus continued. After that, we take you by force, and I can't guarantee how much of your capital will remain intact. The transmission cut off before Zix could respond. In the council chamber, panic had given way to resignation. Minister Kalara and 6 other council members had already fled. Those who remained looked to Zix with desperate eyes. We should have listened to Vox, one of them said quietly. Zix turned to his military adjutant. Prepare my personal battlecruiser. We'll break through their blockade. Sir, the adjutant replied hesitantly, our analysts don't believe that's possible. Their numbers are too great, and they've positioned themselves specifically to counter our jump technology. Zix looked around the chamber at the cowering council members, at the empire he had helped build now falling apart because of one miscalculation. One species they had assumed was like all the others. Then prepare for ground defense, he ordered. If they want us, they'll have to come and take us. The battle for the hegemony capital was brief but fierce. Human ships, augmented with technologies borrowed and improved from a dozen worlds, systematically disabled the orbital defenses. Ground forces, led by Marcus himself, fought their way to the council chambers. When they finally breached the inner sanctum, they found Zix waiting alone, the other council members having surrendered or fled. You've destroyed everything we built, Zix said as Marcus and his team surrounded him, weapons raised. No, Marcus replied. You did that when you decided our world was just another resource to exploit. We're just finishing what you started. Zix lunged suddenly, his natural weapons extended. A dozen weapons fired simultaneously, and the supreme commander of the hegemony fell for the last time. 3 days later, Sarah Chen stood on the balcony of what had been the council chamber, now repurposed as the headquarters for the transition government. Elder Vox stood beside her, watching as ships from former hegemony worlds arrived to join the diplomatic talks. What will you do now, Admiral? Vox asked. Your vengeance is complete. Sarah looked out at the stars visible in the evening sky. Vengeance was just the beginning. We've got a galaxy to rebuild, preferably one where no species can do to others what the hegemony did to us. A noble goal, Vox acknowledged, though not an easy one. The easy path led us here, Sarah replied. Earth remembers that lesson, if nothing else. As representatives from 24 worlds gathered in the chamber behind them, human diplomats moved among them, not as conquerors, but as equals. The hunters had become builders, and somewhere in the galaxy, on a planet still recovering from orbital bombardment, the children of Earth looked up at the stars not with fear, but with hope. The hegemony had ignored the warning. Humanity had remembered. And now, the galaxy would never be the same.